Hello and welcome to another Shadowverse video. So today we are checking out a ShadowCraft deck. This is your pretty standard it's a natural ShadowCraft deck, although it's mostly a 1 damage, 1 attack follower deck with the Natra engine as just kind of an extra for the Viridia Magna play, as that's really the only thing that you use it for in this entire build. It's mostly focusing on taking advantage of, where'd he go? I know he's here, there he is. Doji has an amazing evo effect, giving Storm to anything that has 1 attack or 1 defense for the first time on each turn, meaning you can actually combo that with cards like Mino here with its enhanced 7 to get a absolutely crazy Storm play going, especially with Shadow Generation, which works quite well. It also goes really nicely with a lot of these cards because they are always 2/1 cards. Some people would probably put in something like Nicola Riddell. I'm personally not a big fan of him, although a lot of these cards are Knight of the Living Dog, another card that could really be boosted quite quickly if you generate enough trees, which is one of the only other cards that actually combos well other than Viridia Magna in this build. And then we've got, of course, our draw engine here, put a follower with the original attack of 1 and a random follower with original 1 defense, which is our 2 draw, which is another really strong card. And just 1 Shiva, because the Shiva seems to be a pretty popular staple in a lot of decks these days, and it works pretty well in a deck here. So we're going to get right into this and check it out. Okay, so first up we're going up against a Runecraft. As you guys know, one of the more popular decks, so definitely a good matchup for Shadow to start off with. I actually think Shadow has a reasonable matchup against Rune overall. And this deck, I think, or at least variations on this deck, are quite popular at the moment as far as ShadowCraft goes. I've seen a few tournament style decks in a very similar vein to this, so it's not a huge surprise. I just decided to go for Crafty Reaper here as our turn 1 play, as I really just wanted something out early that I could take advantage of. It probably wasn't the correct play because of course we had Doji in hand and we could have got a really good turn 7 play later on, but I wouldn't have really had anything else to play early on, and having something on board is better than nothing at the start of a Rune matchup. But we end up going fairly well here, making the right play to hold on to the Great Tree for now, although we may have to use it for draw shortly because we don't really have that many options available to us, and we are on the back foot for evoing. So I do decide to go for the Knight of the Living Dog here. Try and go for that setup now. And I did make a small mistake. I probably should have went for the Traveler's Respite instead of the play I went for, because then I could have got the free buff next turn if our dog survived, so there's always that. But they're probably going to hard target the dog anyway, so it's not like it's a big deal. It just would have been more convenient for the next turn. Small misplays that probably could have been done a little bit better. Although again, Traveler's Respite isn't bad here because it's going to heal us when we need it, so that's always good. So we get the Doji off, which means anything that comes down now will get a buff with the Storm, so that's always good. Plus, he does have Bane, so he should be able to take out 2 or 3 cards pretty easily, especially against Rune, provided we don't just get 1 hit by a spell, which happens sometimes, but it's not the end of the world. I think we are just short from going on with proper Viridia Magna, although if we need to, we can go for at least a 1 card attack here. There it is. The Fiery Embrace, ruining all my hopes and dreams, as always. So we take that out, since we have a chance to. I decided to go for the Ram. It's a good play, solid. Knowledge Seeker, so we're absorbing a lot of damage here, which is good. Our board is just soaking it up, which is actually something it does fairly well against Rune. It's only really going to be a trouble if they start generating too much value. So even though the Evo effect takes place, the Storm effect still goes on them immediately if they're dropped to the board. It's actually one of the great things due to order of effects that keeps this deck reasonably viable. If there was ever a change that messed up the timings of things, it would really screw this over, but since it hits the board, technically gets Storm and then evolves, it works fairly well for most cards. So we do have to get around this somehow and hopefully try and go for a lethal, but I don't see that. So I guess we just kind of take whatever we can get here. So we take out some of the stronger cards. That'll also set up a nice Viridian when we need it. And I aim for mostly a draw because I'm looking for something I can win the game with, and that's actually a card we can use. So Crafty Reaper will put us very close to lethal, and our Viridia Magna was obviously just short of being usable, which is disappointing, but... because usually it's at the end of turn, isn't it? We get it, or did they already take that out? Maybe I missed it completely in my head. Either way, focusing on the Crafty Reaper, we can get this. We can hit the face for a good amount of damage. We just need to be able to take out that ward, which, considering we've got a 4-4 on board, we should be fine. We can actually easily win this now. As we remove that, we go for the Crafty Reaper, which gets a nice buff. We're only going to be able to take it to 8, so we were going to be one short no matter what here. But thanks to the 4-4, we end up securing the victory. So our next matchup is actually against Shadow. So Shadow on Shadow should be interesting. This deck has actually grown on me quite a bit. I'm not usually a fan of Shadow decks, but this one in particular definitely has a good, solid playstyle, and I really like that. It mixes two kind of styles of just like one-drop storms and Natra engine in it, and that actually feels pretty good with this deck. It reminds me a lot of some of the old Machina decks that was floating around for quite a while, or Machina decks, Deus Ex Machina, I don't know. Either way, they were always quite fun, some of them. Some of them were quite abused, but mostly fun. And usually you could splash their engine into a lot of variants, which were cool. And Natra has always been similar, but it's not really until this expansion that we started seeing it take a really interesting turn on being a much smaller engine in a much bigger package. So we didn't get lucky with our draw, but we do at least get the setup here, which is nice for our great trees, so it's always good. Shiva's looking to be probably our best kind of, not game winner, but long-term card here. Because at the moment, all I can really do is slam puddings to the board and, you know, threaten them at this point. Since none of these are too dangerous, the end of your turn, destroy a Ram allied. Ah, Fatal Fields. Why? Why would you do this to me, Fatal Fields? Alright, so we're going for tree plays. We're mainly looking to try and draw Doji. If we can get him in our hand, we should be set. So that's why I am pumping as many of these trees as I can. Fortunately, not really getting anywhere, but we did get a lot of tree plays, so I mean, that's something. Not that that's going to serve us great right now. So without getting anything, we decide to go for the Poltergeist here. Evo, why not? Take it out. Get as much damage as I can this turn, since we are already ahead. Demonic Possession, interesting. And Lara Soul Taker. So I got a really interesting variation here with Prince of Cocytus. This actually looks like a quite fun variant. Cocytus decks were always something I was quite partial to, so who knows? This could be interesting. Now we got a really, really interesting play. So I decided not to take the Evo, even though I probably should have. And Infernal Gaze, making all our spells cost too much. So we can't actually use Manifest Malice next turn now. At least we get to keep our 1-1 up here. And we can go for at least Cassia. Try and get something. A Ram, why not? I mean, that'll try more draw. That's all we can do right now. Draw as many cards as we can. Ooh, there's Magna, and we're just throwing down at Crafty because I don't have anything else. That does buff our board quite nicely. Purgatory, actually not a worry here. Well, it's quite a high value card. Viridia will take it out immediately and then set itself up with a ward, or, you know, Fatal Fields can do that job for us actually, so it's not even an issue. So I realized here, if I had have actually went for the Evo due to Shiva's effects, which I really should pay more attention to, by the way, I would have actually won the game immediately. Fortunately, it didn't make a big difference. The Scorpion of Greed really isn't going to be enough to pressure us, and everything else here isn't too big a threat, but we could have just won straight up, and that would have been much better. I just obviously wasn't used to how Shiva functioned and used to its 4 damage effect going off, so I didn't really plan for it, as I should have. If you get used to this deck more, obviously those misplays will go down, and you'll be able to successfully do this a lot easier, but for now, we just had to kind of wipe the board and go face and, you know, draw it out a couple more turns than what it should have probably been. But in the end, I mean, we're still pretty much won here. Hellbeast killed themselves. Didn't really have a choice of options. Glad I left them with too many, but That's always good. But all in all, this deck is definitely a fun one, and I definitely recommend giving it a go if you got the cards. It's also not super crazy expensive. I mean, it's got a few golds in it, but we're only running 3 total legendaries, of which they're both older legendaries and not too hard to get a hold of. Plus, Viridia Magna is quite popular in a few variations, so it's quite good. So is Shiva, as they're both pretty stable cards for their variants of decks. And everything else in this deck is reasonably cheap and performs quite well. If you can start mitigating those misplays a bit, you should be able to pick up this deck fairly easily. If you can run into a problem with Spell Boost Rune, although that's not always the case, if you get a good turn with, I've lost him again, Doji, you can actually do fairly well, so you don't have to worry. So if you guys did enjoy this video and you want to check this deck out, I'll leave a link in the description below. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more content. Until next time, guys, see ya.